Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to give some love to the underappreciated Cavalier. They have an incredibly cheap upgrade cost, attack faster than Paladins, and especially in 1v1 games where the gold cost of Paladin comes into play, Cavalier is sometimes really all you need, or at least all you can afford. In addition, quite a few civilizations lacking the Paladin upgrade have some very solid bonuses or attacks to at least partially make up for that. Even in team games, the Cavalier is still a powerful and mobile unit. So for this one, we're going to be taking a look at the best civilization set up to dominate with it. Immediately though, we run into a problem, as there's really two completely different ways to approach a topic, and a big decision needs to be made from the onset. Do we want to restrict the discussion to Cavalier-only civilizations, or open things up to all Cavaliers, including Paladin civs like Franks, and just ignore the Paladins specifically? Admittedly, restricting things to civilizations that max out at Cavalier makes for a bit of a stretch as a top 5 list, to the point I had to start including civilizations just because they had good farming bonuses. So I decided for this one, we'll open it up to all civilizations, which I think makes for a more interesting discussion. With that out of the way, let's start off our best Cavaliers at number 10 with the Huns. Of course, Huns have Paladin, but even just the Cavalier is a safe pick for this list. You have faster working stables, helping to build up numbers, research Cavalier faster, and not needing houses always makes everything feel a bit more smooth. While the Cavalier itself is completely generic, it has enough helping in the peripherals to start us off as an all-around solid choice. Next up, at number 9, we have the Portuguese, with their 20% gold discount on units. While Portuguese are probably best known as an archer and gunpowder civilization, their Cavaliers are fully upgraded and also benefit from that discount, making them a sneaky good unit in the late game, able to actually create 25% more units with a given amount of gold to spend. Moving on to number 8, we have the newest addition to the game, the Romans. Their advantages are that after a unique tech, their Cavaliers are created 50% faster and have a +5 charge attack. Romans, it has to be said, also have a very good overall economy, with 5% more resources gathered by villagers, making pretty much any strategy a bit better than the tech tree alone would imply. Now, the +5 charge attack has a 20-second cooldown, so it's good for maybe 1 or 2 uses per battle, and is nowhere close to a +5 attack across the board. But it does have enough of an impact that they can actually beat generic Cavaliers like Portuguese with equal numbers, and can even keep up with some of the weakest Paladins. That said, it's actually the faster creation speed that pushes them ahead for me, with the fastest creation time for all Cavaliers in the game, even faster than Franks. Naturally, they do compete with the Centurion in the heavy cavalry role, so they aren't seen as often as others on the list, but I still think they're fairly respectable. Next up, at number 7, we have the Franks. While they're much more famous for their Paladins and are the historical root for those in the first place, again, that upgrade is expensive, and their Cavalier are pretty good already. Functionally, they have free bloodlines, plus another 4 HP, they have +2 line of sight, and the tech Chivalry, which has a similar feeling effect to the Romans, increasing their stable work rate by 40%. Everything about Franks is nicely streamlined to go scouts into knights, so the Cavalier can add a nice power spike, making it all feel very natural. One unfortunate thing for Franks is their HP bonus is a multiplier of the unit's base stats, so while it adds 32 to a Paladin's HP, to a Cavalier it only adds 24. That is enough though to functionally negate the Romans' charge attack, and Franks win that fight with equal resources. Franks probably would have been even higher on the list a few years ago, but keep in mind Chivalry is now a more expensive and Imperial Age tech, so it's no longer a safe assumption to have before you really start massing Cavalier, given how many other things compete for your resources in early Imperial. Moving on to number 6, we have another Paladin civilization, the Teutons. Like Franks, they have several bonuses helping here, with +2 melee armor, cheaper farms helping power their economy into a strong early Imperial, as well as some natural resistance to conversions. Even just the extra melee armor alone means they can even beat Frank Cavaliers head-to-head, and important to note here is that all of their bonuses are completely passive, meaning you don't need a castle or to invest anything into unique techs. In fact, the only real issue here is lacking husbandry, taking away from some of their mobility and making it more difficult for them to choose the fights they want at opportune moments. Next up, at number 5, we have the Bulgarians. On paper, they sound completely broken, with their Castle Age unique tech stirrups letting their knights and later Cavalier attack 33% faster. I expect some people would count them as a contender for number 1, and the tech is surprisingly cheap as well. They even research blacksmith upgrades faster and cheaper, helping your Imperial Age power spike, and certainly late Castle Age into early Imperial is a very nice window for them. They even beat heavily armored Teuton Cavaliers with equal numbers, so they're definitely above average, and I understand if number 5 sounds too low. Maybe surprisingly though, they don't even beat generic Paladins, and tie or lose to 3 of the remaining 4 Cavalier civilizations we haven't gotten to yet. The fact of the matter is there's just a lot of really good Cavaliers out there, and if anything this speaks to the strength of the remaining civilizations, as Bulgarians are very well set up for Knights and Cavaliers and can be quite dangerous when utilizing their unique tech. Moving on, at number 4 we have the Malians. Similar to Bulgarians, they have a unique tech they rely on here, this time giving +5 attack, though notably lacking Blast Furnace, so it's functioning +3 more than usual. This technology makes them actually identical to Bulgarians 1 vs 1, taking the exact same amount of time to defeat the other, so with equal numbers the battles can go either way. Still, their unique tech is more expensive than Stirrups and comes later, so Malians would have been lower if not for 2 other advantages that are easy to overlook. The first is their gold mines last longer, meaning they're able to create their gold-intensive Cavaliers for longer in theory. The other is that higher attack scales a bit better against higher armor targets than faster attack. So against the toughest enemies with the highest melee armor, where Cavaliers usually struggle the most, Malians end up pulling a bit ahead, though it's important to emphasize the 2 Cavaliers are incredibly similar in the late game, where both give you something functionally quite similar to a Paladin without bloodlines. So with 2 such strong civs already locked in, who could possibly be next? Well, at number 3 we have the Berbers, with 20% cheaper stable units, translating into 25% more units for the same cost. Unlike the previous 2 entries, this bonus helps immediately when you enter Castle Age with no unique tech or castle to create first, letting you build up your numbers for the ultimate Cavalier power spike down the road. Admittedly, Berber Cavaliers themselves are generic when fully upgraded, but critically, if you can leverage their discount into the same resources worth of units, they in fact beat Bulgarians and Malians head to head. This is classic Lanchester square law in action, where the best performing units tend to be the ones you can make the most of. In fact, they're the only Cavalier we've seen so far that can beat Huns or other generic Paladins with equal resources, albeit in a close fight, which even Bulgarians and Malians can't say. While generally I haven't been putting much weight on other tech tree options these civilizations have, between discounted camels and camel archers, Berbers even have some very nice pairings with Cavalier that make them feel very smooth to play. But ultimately the fact they beat all of the previous entries we've seen with equal resources meant I just couldn't justify them any lower than this. In fact, they even beat the number 2 civilization, which is going to be the Sicilians. This is a case where I'm breaking my rule about emphasizing melee ability and instead respecting how well-rounded Sicilian Cavaliers are in 3 major ways. First, they take 33% less bonus damage from spears, camels, etc., making them more frustrating to directly counter. Second, their unique tech First Crusade gives them conversion resistance, thwarting enemy monks. Third, their unique tech Hauberk gives them +1/+2 armor, essentially getting half the Teuton's bonus in melee and even 1 more pierce armor than a Paladin, with 2 more than everything else we've seen so far. They do lose to Berbers, Malians, and Bulgarians with equal resources, and in fact heavy cavalry are one of the more effective ways to deal with Sicilian Cavaliers, as archers and the usual counters are much less effective. At one point, they were probably the most well-rounded cavalry in the game, back when they took half bonus damage and Hauberk was cheaper. And while they're not quite as strong as they were in their prime, they're still incredibly annoying to deal with, and are easily in the discussion as one of the top Cavaliers. Now, before we get to number 1, I have a few honorable mentions, all of which I strongly debated sneaking into the list. The first is Burgundians. They get the Cavalier in Castle Age and a discount on stable techs, but unfortunately no bloodlines. So without the Paladin upgrade, they max out very early. This one is hard to compare with the rest of the list, as they get them the earliest, but feel odd to be called one of the best Cavaliers. Even Chinese end up saving a similar amount on their Cavalier tech switch if you include blacksmith techs, and Burgundians lose to generic Cavaliers head to head, so altogether they just didn't feel right to include here. Another one to point out is the Cumans, who have faster movement and cheaper stables. Both are quite useful, but very hard to compare to more concrete things like attack or even discounts. Admittedly, they probably could have been on the list instead of Huns or Romans, but ultimately I like them just a bit less. Similarly, I should also mention Lithuanians, who have up to +4 attack from relics but no blast furnace. Ultimately, the issue was it's just too hard to reliably get 4 relics every time, but in a case you can get 4, they end up roughly on the same level as Bulgarians or Malians without having to pay for a unique tech. So situationally, we'll say they're top 5. And finally, a quick shout out to Burmese, who have a unique tech giving +4 attack versus archers. You could argue this is a slightly better version of the Persians' team bonus, though you have to pay for it. Again, it was just a bit too situational for the list, and they're beaten head-to-head by basically everything we've seen. That brings us to number 1 though, and by process of elimination, you can probably already guess what it is. To me, the number 1 Cavalier civilization is the Poles. I expect not everyone would agree, but for me their unique tech giving a 60% gold discount on the Cavalier is simply unparalleled. Where most civilizations pay 150 gold for 2 Cavaliers, that's enough for Poles to make 5. Alternately, even going by total resources, you're still getting 50% more, and backing this up is a solid food economy through the Folwark, helping to mass up knights in late Castle Age for an instant Cavalier spike in Imperial. For a bit of perspective, 50% more units is so impactful that Poles are basically an even fight against Frank Paladins if you balance total resources, making it 12 versus 8. But even with equal numbers, Poles are cost effective against Franks in terms of gold, which no other unit on the list even comes close to. Here, for example, 8 versus 8, the Frank Paladins are burning through 45% more gold worth of units than the Poles did. Maybe just as impressive, Poles even do better than Sicilians against an identical group of camels or halberdiers, despite the Sicilians' reduced bonus damage, which made for a compelling argument to put them so high in the first place. Now, on the flip side, Poles lack the final armor upgrade, and while that doesn't matter too much in melee, against ranged units that can be a big deal. Where Sicilians thrive in that situation, admittedly after an expensive Imperial upgrade, Poles are in fact the worst in the entire list we've seen against Arbalesters, but the gold savings are just too amazing in 1 vs 1 or even team games, and could be funneled into onagers or bombard cannons if archers are becoming too big of a problem anyway. Saving so much gold just opens lots of options for you. I admit I didn't go in thinking I would pick Poles for number 1, but seeing them beat up on every other entry in the list, as well as a bunch of Paladins, ultimately swayed my opinion. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.